A martial artist runs, practicing the art of shinmuhak. He pushes onward through a fierce blizzard. This art values swift killing and suppression above all. With just a single strike, an opponent is defeated. The defeated martial artist lets out a scream of pain. He collapses, proving the art's focus on real combat. Practitioners endure extreme training, like intense push-ups. The training is relentless and builds incredible power. It prepares them to counter any fighting style effectively. Meanwhile, at the Murm Alliance, a meeting is taking place. Namgung Byok claims his martial system is the most advanced. With Shinmuhak nearly done, he will challenge all martial artists. He confidently states that they will never be defeated. The other martial leaders exchange uncertain glances. Leader Nung Pungun knows this duel proves their victory. In a training room, a disciple prepares his spear. He aims the sharp point at another student. Both of them steel themselves for the attack. With a determined shout, he thrusts the spear forward. But amazingly, the spear bends upon impact with his body. The attacker refuses to yield and pushes even harder. Using a throat-pierce technique, the spear shatters completely. A different disciple now steps forward with a blade. He performs the devastating chest blade strike technique. The defender then lies on a bed of nails. A rock on his stomach is shattered by Mountain Crusher. He then uses sea-splitting palm to crush a stone. Dan Mukguang, with his diamond body, believed Shinmuhak's attacks were completely useless. However, Dan Mukguang was utterly defeated with just a single, decisive strike. He collapsed to the ground, his confidence and body completely shattered. His followers cried out as his indestructible body was broken in one exchange. Next, the Samu Sect boasted that Shinmuhak couldn't even last 3 moves. The Shinmuhak Association calmly accepted, granting them those 3 moves. The Samu Sect was knocked unconscious without their robes ever being touched. They felt immense humiliation, unable to face their master and ancestors. Then, the Qingcheng Sect dismissed Shinmuhak's art as mere crude brawling. But just like the others, the Qingcheng Sect was also swiftly defeated. Their prestigious orthodox techniques had been bested by the new martial arts. He declared his personal loss didn't mean the Qingcheng Sect was weak. Overcome with shame, the defeated disciple then threw himself into the river. His fellow disciples then found their senior brother's body in the river. Meanwhile, another martial artist was defeated with a single, brutal punch. The defeated fighter collapsed to the ground, unable to continue. Namgung Byok watched contentedly as the Kunlun Sect's representative fell. The unconscious opponent was then unceremoniously dragged away from the stage. The crowd roared as the Diankong Sect's fighter was also defeated. One by one, other factions like the Mount Heng Sect also fell. Soon after, the Kongtong Sect was decisively beaten as well. At the meeting, the defeated martial leaders hung their heads in shame. Standing tall, Namgung Byok announced that the verification of Shinmuhak was complete. He smiled, stating that isolation leads to decline and Shinmuhak's doors are open. The Hainan Sect conceded, agreeing to follow this new current. The Hebei Peng clan declared that the times have changed and Shinmuhak is the future. However, the White Crane Sect refused to ally and withdrew from the alliance. The Beggars Sect, claiming ignorance, decided to remain neutral as always. Shinmuhak was officially adopted as a required subject for the Murm Alliance. Namgung Byok oversaw everything, his grand plan finally coming to fruition. His influence rapidly spread throughout the land. The Zhuge clan, overwhelmed, finally declared their allegiance to Shinmuhak. At Shaolin Temple, a report confirmed most sects had already converted. Shaolin believed true martial arts needed no validation in the current conflict. Night fell over the quiet, unyielding Shaolin Temple. While the world was in turmoil, a new journey was just beginning. Far away on the serene Wudang Mountain, a lone figure made his approach. A traveler walked with determined steps. He steadily climbed the long stone stairs. A faint, knowing smile graced his lips. This was Im Chung Yov, the second disciple. With purpose in his heart, he continued his ascent. As he finally neared the top of the stairs, a strange sight awaited him. He looked forward, expecting to see the familiar entrance of his home. But what he saw left him completely stunned and speechless. The entire sect entrance was in tatters, a scene of utter destruction. He stood there, completely shaken by the unbelievable wreckage before his eyes. The grand door was broken, and the sect's proud sign was crumbling away. A deep confusion washed over him. None of this made any sense. Without a second thought, he broke into a desperate run, hurrying inside. He ran through the desolate grounds, his heart pounding with a rising dread. The whole place was in shambles, everything either burned or completely broken. Chung Yob couldn't believe his eyes, wondering what on earth had happened here. He desperately called out for anyone, announcing that he had finally returned home. He shouted the names of his master and his beloved senior brother, but the entire place was eerily empty, devoid of any signs of life. His desperate calls were met with nothing but a haunting, heavy silence. It was as if the sect, his home, had been completely and utterly abandoned. He removed his hat, taking in the desolate sight before him. Grabbing his head in shock, he desperately wondered what had happened. Suddenly, the faint scent of burning incense reached him. Im Chung-yob's senses immediately locked onto its source. He realized someone was praying somewhere within the sect's grounds. Without a moment's hesitation, he rushed towards the location. His search led him directly to the sect's temple room. He pushed open the doors and stepped inside the hall. Inside was Jia Mu-young, the second disciple, who turned around. Surprised, Jia Mu-young recognized his senior brother. Im Chung-yob softly spoke his junior's name in disbelief. They called out to each other, a mix of shock and relief. Overcome with emotion, the two martial brothers immediately embraced. Jia Mu-young tearfully welcomed his senior brother's long-awaited return. Im Chung-yob demanded to know what happened, questioning his strange clothes. He asked if the sect had been attacked, but Mu-young hesitated. Struggling for words, Myung began to explain what became of their sect. He took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the terrible news. With a heavy heart, he revealed their sect had been utterly ruined. Im Chung-yob stood in stunned silence, utterly confused by the news. He asked his senior brother what he meant by ruined. Jum Mu-young explained Wudong went bankrupt and the other disciples scattered. Chung-yob was completely shocked by the terrible revelation. He immediately asked about their senior brother, Seo-kyun. He explained Seo-kyun left to find money but never returned. When asked about Master Jinmu, he revealed Jinmu joined another sect. He then questioned the fate of the sect leader and elders. Im Chung-yob recalled their promise to somehow make some money. He desperately asked what happened, as his brother started to sob. They lost everything playing mahjong and are now wanted fugitives with debts. Chung-yob repeated the word in complete disbelief, mahjong. Debt collectors took all their treasured swords and secret manuals. Only an incense burner and a banner were left. Chung-yob fell into a deep, devastated silence. Overwhelmed by the truth, Chung-yob turned away. As he left, his brother said he'd been waiting for their return, but he stopped at the entrance, hesitating for a moment. Ju Mu-young tentatively called out to his senior brother. His senior brother suddenly lost his balance. Chung-yob then collapsed to the ground. Mu-young could only watch in complete shock. A memory surfaced of their master calling to them as children. He showed them the bronze burner, its sacred flame never extinguished. It was Wudong's most sacred relic, more valuable than any treasure. A young Seok-hun wondered if the flame truly never went out. Their master was Seok Cheonwoo, Wudong's former headmaster. Cheonwoo chuckled, praising Seok-hun for his sharp question. He admitted he once let the flame die, shocking the young boy. His own headmaster had just laughed, admitting to the same mistake. Seok-hyun was confused, but it was only wrong if done purposefully. Cheonwoo said the flame's endurance was symbolic, as human error is inevitable. Wudang's spirit lives through devotion. Corruption would truly extinguish it. Jia Mu-young tried to get his senior brother's attention. Sometime later, Mu-young was tending to the injured Chung-yob. He told him food was ready and that he was leaving for work. But Chung-yob was unresponsive, shrugging off Mu-young's concern. A worried expression crossed Mu-young's face. Seeing there was nothing more he could do, Mu-young left the room. Alone, Chung-yob remained in his room, overcome with depression. Meanwhile, at a bustling tavern somewhere else, a customer called for service, and Mu-young quickly responded. Another patron ordered 2 bowls of noodles from him. Back in his room, Chung-yob was still all alone. He sat alone, lost in the quiet of his room. His gaze then drifted towards his sword. Customers shouted for their orders, and Mu-young rushed to serve them. As he hurried, someone suddenly tripped him. He fell hard, spilling all the food. Back in his room, Chung-yob unsheathed his sword. He stared down at the cold, sharp blade. His own reflection stared back at him. He slowly slid the sword back into its sheath. Mu-young repeatedly apologized while cleaning the floor. The frustrated customers got up and left the inn. Chung-yob was once again alone, staring blankly. He turned his head, drawn by a sight. His gaze fell upon the incense stick. It was still burning slowly in the room. Chung-yob then glanced outside. He saw Mu-young sitting alone on the ground. Mu-young quietly took something out. It was a ring tied to a necklace. His face was etched with deep sadness. He clutched the precious item tightly. Chung-yob felt Wudong's soul had truly died. He believed the spirit of Wudong was gone. An air of profound loss settled over him. He sought refuge from his sorrow at a tavern. Jia Mu-young welcomed the traveler to Gaju Inn. He guided the guest inside as food was announced. The inn was a simple, quiet establishment. The inn owner worried about profit, wanting a guest gone. He questioned if the guest had anywhere else to go. Hearing this, Mu-young's expression fell into sadness. The owner considered sharing rooms but dismissed the idea. Mu-young offered to pay the guest's fee from his wages. The owner was completely surprised by this generous offer. The owner refused. Mu-young was shocked, expecting him to agree. He explained the fee would leave Mu-young with nothing. Mu Young insisted that food and shelter were enough. Desperate, he bowed deeply, pleading with the owner. The owner relented, offering a small deduction from his peak season wages. Overwhelmed, Mu Young thanked him profusely. The owner felt apologetic. The owner then shifted the conversation, mentioning his senior brother. He complained that the man was being too much, just lazing around every day. He felt sorry for him, only overlooking it because of a debt to Wudong. Mu Young defended him, insisting his senior brother was just tired. He insisted this was just a long rest, believing he would surely recover. Meanwhile, the senior brother was shown casually picking his nose. Later that same day, the scene shifted. A lone wanderer happened to be passing by the area. Something caught his attention, and the wanderer suddenly stopped. He paused, looking intently at something just ahead. It was then that he noticed something peculiar. It was the sign for the Gaiju Inn. The wanderer decided to enter the inn. Mu Young looked up and welcomed the wanderer. The inn owner told him to continue his work. Mu Young offered to show the lone traveler inside. The mysterious wanderer followed Mu Young deeper into the inn. He politely asked what the wanderer would like to order. The wanderer greeted him familiarly, causing Mu Young to freeze. Utterly confused, Mu Young stared at the man before him. The wanderer slowly removed his hat, revealing his face. It was Jung Seok-hyun, a hero of Wudong, asking if he'd been well. Mu Young could only stammer Seok-hyun's name in utter shock. Mu Young and Seok-hyun rushed to Chung Yob's room, calling out his name excitedly. They found Chung Yob lying down, curled into a ball on his bed. Chung Yob barely managed to glance over at the two of them. Seok-hyun greeted him, asking if his 3-year wandering trial went well. After a moment, Chung Yob simply looked away from them again. He completely ignored their presence, leaving Seok-hyun stunned by the cold shoulder. Seok-hyun reassured Mu Young, suggesting their senior brother was just tired. Mu Young demanded respect, but Seok-hyun suddenly noticed an incense burner. Seok-hyun stared at it, confused about why it was there. He couldn't understand why the incense burner was in the room. His mind then flashed to the Sect's destroyed and desolate grounds. The sight of the utter devastation left him completely shocked. The Sect was in ruins, rendering Seok-hyun completely speechless. Mu Young explained he offered incense daily until a storm destroyed the hall. He brought it to the inn to continue, reflecting on how he endured. Seok-hyun announced there was no need to worry, as they had both returned. He declared their intention to restart the Wudong sect once more. Overwhelmed, Mu Young called out to his senior brother. Later that night, the group finally came together. They gathered around their comrade, Chung Yob. Seok-hyun acknowledged his hardship, having heard the story from Mu Young, but Chung Yob remained silent, completely ignoring them. Seok-hyun tried to get his attention once more. He urged him to start over, reminding him they were all together now. Chung Yob finally spoke, questioning what starting over meant. Seok-hyun confidently responded, "Of course they're Wudong." He recalled how their founder started from nothing, claiming they were better off. But Chung Yob called the founder a legend, insisting the truth was different. Chung Yob declared he had already fulfilled his duty to Wudong. He told them to proceed without him. It was no longer his concern. Mu Young asked if he would truly abandon them until the very end. Frustrated, Mu Young grabbed his leg, reminding him of his rank. He urged Chung Yob to rise and confront the world's injustice and evil. As Mu Young yelled, a sad Seok-hyun watched his old friends. The tense argument eventually subsided as night fell over the mountain. Later, Mu Young donned his old, formal Wudong robe with purpose. He carefully adjusted his headwear, preparing for what was to come. He secured his sword, a symbol of his commitment, onto his back. Fully dressed and armed, his preparation was finally complete. A look of grim determination settled across Mu Young's face. Ready to leave, he told Seok-hyun to forget about Chung Yob. Seok-hyun knew Chung Yob was still burdened by events from his past. Mu Young complained, fed up with Chung Yob's childish sulking. Seok-hyun remained silent, listening to Mu Young's frustration. Shocking Mu Young, Seok-hyun insisted he should stay with Chung Yob. Seok-hyun admitted he was too hasty, understanding Chung Yob's hesitation. He explained that he had been working on his own plan. Results would convince Chung Yob, so he asked Mu Young to watch over him. Hearing this, Mu Young couldn't help but look sad. Seok-hyun reassured him, promising he would return soon. Mu Young seemed to understand and accepted his request. A moment of quiet understanding passed between them. Seok-hyun then asked if he also had the flag with the incense burner. Seok-hyun took both the incense burner and the flag. Mu Young worried it would be uncomfortable for him to carry them. Seok-hyun dismissed his concerns, finding the idea refreshing. He again asked Mu Young to take care of Chung Yob. With that, Seok-hyun departed with the incense burner and the flag. Mu Young pleaded for his senior to take care of himself. Seok-hyun paused and turned back to look at him. He gave a small, confirming nod before finally departing. Watching him leave, Mu Young looked incredibly sad. At that very moment, in another room, Chung Yob was sulking all by himself. He had fallen asleep while stewing in his thoughts. He dreamed of Seok-yeon welcoming him as his first junior disciple. He remembered Seok-yeon pushing him to run just one more lap. They trained together, running through a harsh blizzard. They pushed on until they were completely exhausted. Meanwhile, Master Cheon-woo simply sat and drew calmly. Master Cheon-woo let out a quiet, satisfied chuckle. He was deeply focused, practicing his drawing technique. His subjects were the disciples, captured mid-training. At that moment, Chung Yob's eyes fluttered open. His gaze immediately fell upon a drawing on the wall. It was the piece Master Cheon-woo had just created. After a moment, Chung Yob turned his face away. He thought of a distant peak that even clouds couldn't reach. The writing on the drawing described climbing that lofty summit. On a dark and rainy night, a mysterious man sought shelter. Entering in the inn, a servant immediately welcomed him inside. The man bluntly asked if Ji Mu-young was there. The servant was visibly startled by the direct question. "Then was Ji Mu-young," answered the man. The visitor had a letter from someone named Jang Seok-hyun. With his task complete, the visitor prepared to depart. But Ji Mu-young urgently asked him to wait a moment. Mu-young offered the tired man a meal, which he gladly accepted. A few minutes later, they settled down for the meal. The man began to eat his food gratefully. Meanwhile, Mu-young started to read the letter he had received. The letter expressed concern about the inn business during the hot weather. Funds had been gathered, and it was time for Wudang's new beginning. The first step for Wudang's rebirth would be an escort bureau. Mu-young smiled, reading about new allies and the founding ceremony invitation. Excited, Mu-young rushed out, calling for his senior brother. Finally, the day of the founding ceremony arrived. A large crowd had already gathered at the new entrance. Seok-hyun welcomed his guests, thanking them for their support. He greeted each person with sincere gratitude. Then, a familiar voice called out his name. It was Nang Ho-sang, a lay disciple from Shaolin. Seok-hyun was surprised and happy to see his old friend. The two friends warmly caught up after so long. Nang Ho-sang congratulated him, and Seok-hyun was truly grateful. He then invited his old friend to come inside. But just then, another arrival made Seok-hyun turn. The crowd's attention shifted as well, following his gaze. A young woman, Ji Mu-young, called out to him. Stunned, he approached her as she offered her congratulations. Seok-hyun invited them in but questioned the purpose of the cart. He was shocked to see Chung Yob sitting inside it. Overwhelmed, Seok-hyun could only stammer out Chung Yob's name. Chung Yob remained completely silent in response. Instead of speaking, he simply reached out his hand towards Seok-hyun. Seok-hyun gratefully shook his hand, offering his sincere thanks. Ji Mu-young remarked that the fresh air had lifted his spirits. Later, Seok-hyun began his speech by thanking all the guests. He spoke of Wudang's history as a pillar of the martial world. However, he admitted their failure to adapt caused the temple's decline. But now, they had a chance to rise again through heavenly fate. He declared every member would represent Wudang with their conduct. Someone in the crowd mocked the shabby escorts and his sanity. Hearing the whispers, Seok-hyun paused and scanned the crowd. He spoke of a critical time for the martial world's re-established order. He promised cooperation, but a bored guest yawned loudly during his speech. He asked for their support for the new Wudang Escort Bureau's history. After his speech concluded, the crowd began to clap for him. However, the applause felt forced and lacked any real enthusiasm from the audience. An announcer then invited the guests to a special martial contest stage. Surprised, Ji Mu-young peeked into the cart, asking about the contest. A voice called out, recognizing someone as the familiar brother Chung Yob. Chung Yob looked up, searching for the person who had called his name. The man introduced himself as Nang Ho-sang from the Shaolin Sect. Chung Yob quietly acknowledged his old friend, brother Nang. Nang Ho-sang was thrilled to see him after so many years had passed. Chung Yob seemed confused, so Nang asked if his legs were unwell. Ji Mu-young explained that Chung Yob was simply feeling lethargic lately. He then turned to Nang Ho-sang and politely asked for his name. He introduced himself as Nang Ho-sang, a disciple of Shaolin. Ji Mu-young of Wudang then introduced herself. He acknowledged her as a Taoist nun. She warned him to be respectful. Being Chung Yob's junior, he suggested they go. They began walking towards the contest stage together. He explained the custom, win 3 of 5 matches to open a business. Ji Mu-young listened intently, beginning to understand the stakes. Noticing her worried expression, Nang Ho-sang paused for a moment. He reassured her it's now just a friendly exchange for entertainment. She expressed immense relief, fearing a loss would ruin the ceremony. He joked that in the past, these were life-or-death duels. As they talked, the opening event continued to move forward. Soon, the contest stage was fully prepared for the matches. Respected elders began to arrive for the event. Younger martial artists approached to greet the guests. They respectfully bowed to the esteemed figures. The elders then descended the stairs to their seats. The escorts stood by, looking almost lifeless. Ji Mu-young wondered about the large civilian crowd. She worried that important techniques might be exposed. Naang Hosang simply replied that times have changed. A powerful martial artist sat down, looking confident. Seo Kyun was also seated, waiting calmly. With everyone seated, the event finally began. One of the elders stood up to speak. He introduced himself as Hong Cheon Mayong, a former chief. He explained the Martial Alliance's goal is to strengthen the nation through martial arts. He urged representatives to display their best skills and bring honor to the nation. He finished by wishing the new Wudang Escort Bureau a prosperous future. Another elder then explained the best of 5 match rules, including falling or conceding defeat. He added that referees could also stop matches if a contestant was unconscious. The elder stressed that these rules were solely for the participants' own safety. Jang Seok-yeon of the Wudang Escort Bureau was then called to the stage. He stood up and began his determined walk toward the designated battle stage. On his way, Jia Mu-young quietly encouraged him to do his best. Seok-yeon acknowledged Mu-young's support with a glance as he passed by. Just then, Nang Ho-sang called out, getting his attention before the match. He leaned in, whispering a warning to be on guard for the elder's schemes. Seok-yeon thanked him for the warning, promising that he would keep it in mind. Seok-yeon then confidently climbed the stairs to the stage. He took his position, standing valiantly before the crowd. Soon after, his opponent entered the stage as well. The opponent carried himself with a casual, nonchalant air. With both fighters ready, the elder announced the contest's start. Seok-yeon respectfully offered a greeting to his opponent. His opponent casually returned the gesture, accepting the greeting. The formal exchange ended, and the intense battle finally began. Seok-yeon immediately readied his stance, preparing for the first move. His opponent mirrored him, poised and ready for action. From the sidelines, Nyang Ho-sang and others watched intently. Im Chung-yob was also watching, his focus completely unbroken. With an official announcement, the contest began. The two fighters faced each other on the stage. A tense silence fell over the arena. They stood motionless, sizing each other up. The air was thick with anticipation. Both opponents patiently waited for the other to move. Seo-kyun cautiously began to approach his opponent. The opponent attacked first, but Seo-kyun expertly blocked. The opponent followed up with a quick leg strike. But Seo-kyun had already seen the attack coming. He dodged, making his opponent stumble and lose balance. Seo-kyun parried each following attack with smooth movements. Seo-kyun then expertly kicked his opponent's leg. The opponent quickly jumped back, creating distance. The crowd roared, amazed by the display of skill. Everyone was thoroughly enjoying the intense fight. The elders watched the match with great interest. Mu-young, Nang Ho-sang, and Chung-yob observed intently. The two fighters moved in a blur. A flurry of blows was exchanged. It was a lightning-fast and brutal confrontation. Seok moved with incredible speed and power. His opponent clearly struggled to keep up. The tide of the battle shifted quickly. Then, a decisive moment finally arrived. Seok found a critical opening in his defense. He exploited it without a moment's hesitation. The opponent was completely overwhelmed by his strength. He couldn't counter Seok's relentless assault. The match was quickly nearing its conclusion. Suddenly, the opponent was thrown onto his back. Seok immediately pinned him, preventing any escape. He then prepared to deliver the final blow. Terrified, the opponent shut his eyes tightly, but surprisingly, Seok did not strike him. At the last possible second, he held back. The fight came to a sudden end. The opponent immediately yielded, conceding the match. Victory was officially declared for the Wudang Escort Bureau. Jia Mu-young watched in awe as Nang Ho-sang praised the clean hit. The escorts were also amazed, exclaiming that the technique actually worked. One of them remarked that it was real and just as amazing as expected. The defeated opponent slowly rose to his feet. The elder noted that Wudang had saved face in the first contest. Jia Mu-young excitedly praised his martial uncle's incredible performance. Seok-yeon looked back, feeling a quiet sense of contentment. His gaze then shifted upward, toward the sky. He silently vowed to the sages he would restore Wudang's former glory. The announcer then called for the second challenger to take the stage. A new opponent confidently entered the arena. This second challenger appeared very sure of himself. However, Seok-hun paid him no mind at all. Jia Mu-young shot a quick glance toward Nang Ho-sang. Startled, she realized he had noticed her looking. Jia Mu-young asked what he meant by Shinmuhak earlier. He explained it concerned the martial world's current balance of power. Today, the martial world is divided between Shinmuhak and old martial arts. Shinmuhak is a pragmatic school prioritizing rapid killing, and it has spread quickly. He explained that their own skills are now considered old martial arts. Old martial arts are now viewed as an outdated method, soon to disappear. Over half the sects, likely including the judges, now use Shinmuhak. He lamented how small their world feels now as the next duel began. The second opponent attacked, but Seok managed to dodge swiftly. As she listened, Mu-young grew visibly confused by this revelation. She was shocked, but he explained it all happened very recently. Nearby, Im Chung-yob listened carefully to the entire conversation. On the stage, the duel continued with a fierce exchange of blows. The opponent closed the distance, dashing in quickly with a powerful punch. Seok was ready for it, swiftly parrying the attack to the side. For a brief moment, the two opponents paused, creating a tense silence. They carefully observed one another, searching for an opening in their defense. Each fighter gauged the other, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, the second opponent broke the stillness, launching a swift leg strike. He fluidly changed his motion, raising his leg high for another attack. The powerful kick landed squarely, striking Seok directly in the face. The force of the blow sent Seok staggering backward. His opponent pressed forward with a relentless assault. A non-stop barrage of punches rained down upon him. Mu Young and the crowd watched the one-sided fight in shock. Seok was clearly being overwhelmed and pushed back. The opponent continued his fierce, non-stop offensive. He was driven back even further by the vicious onslaught. But then, Seok suddenly lunged forward, grabbing his opponent. He swiftly changed his grip, pulling the man off balance. At that critical moment, Seok seized his opponent's chin. Then, he landed a powerful punch, sending the man flying. The opponent stumbled, completely losing his balance and footing. Before the man could even think to recover, Seok dashed in, unleashing a devastatingly powerful technique. The incredible impact launched his opponent far away. The entire crowd erupted in a roar of excitement. The elders watched the shocking turn of events intently. As the dazed opponent struggled to recover his senses, Seok rushed in and brutally slammed his face to the ground. He pinned him down, displaying his overwhelming skill. With the fight over, Seok finally stopped. His opponent conceded, admitting how impressive Seok was. The crowd erupted into wild and enthusiastic cheers. Watching from the sidelines, Mu Young was filled with joy. However, the remaining opponents appeared completely nonchalant. One of the prepared opponents turned towards the elders. He looked at them expectantly, awaiting a signal. In response, the elders gave a silent, knowing nod. The opponent understood their unspoken command immediately. The announcer called for the third challenger as he stood. He began making his way toward the stage. Nang Ho Sung watched him, feeling wary of this new fighter. The third opponent finally entered the stage. Seok observed him carefully, sensing something different. A strange and powerful energy began emanating from him. Both fighters prepared to battle with all their might. A tense silence hangs in the air. The third contestant offers a formal greeting. Seok acknowledges the gesture with a nod. Without warning, his opponent suddenly charges forward. The unexpected attack catches Seok by surprise. The opponent leaps high into the air. He comes flying down towards Seok from above. Everyone, including Mu Young, is completely shocked. The immense force of their clash reverberates everywhere. The opponent's fist connects directly with Seo-kyun's face. Seo-kyun feels the full, staggering impact of the blow. Watching from the side, Mu Young thinks the move was cowardly. The third opponent unleashes a relentless barrage of punches. The older crowd members call the display shameless and improper. But the younger spectators argue it's the true way of Shinmahak. Confused by the debate, Mu Young glances toward Chung-yob. Im Chung-yob, however, remains completely silent and watches. The assault continues with a brutal knee kick to the face. Seo-kyun is being mercilessly beaten down by the attacks. The older onlookers watch the one-sided duel, looking distraught. But in a swift motion, Seo-kyun grabs his opponent's wrist. He pushes back with every last ounce of his strength. The opponent counters, grabbing the back of Seok's neck. While pushing his head forward, he swiftly trips Seo-kyun. Unable to keep his balance, Seo-kyun crashes to the ground. Grunting in pain, he quickly begins to recover his footing. As Seo gets up, his opponent creates some distance between them. A confident smirk spreads across the opponent's face. Seo-kyun watches him, carefully observing his every move. The opponent then extends his hand forward, ready to fight. Seok was completely caught off guard by the unexpected move. Mu Young and the rest of the crowd were equally stunned. Even Chung-yo was confused by the sudden change. The third opponent settled into a very peculiar fighting stance. Seok was shaken to his core, recognizing the stance. The crowd began to murmur, identifying the hand-grappling arts. His opponent casually asked if he was performing it correctly. Seok stared back, completely bewildered by the strange question. Both fighters paused as the tension thickened in the air. Spectators wondered why Shinmahak was using an old martial art. It was an almost forgotten training method from Old Murim. The hand-grappling arts were also known as hand technique sparring. Unrestrained combat often led to severe injuries or even death. This method was created to prevent such unnecessary loss of life. It was a safer sparring format developed long ago. The two fighters finally moved, slowly approaching one another. Nang Ho Sung instantly recognized it as a deliberate provocation. He was implying Seok couldn't match Shinmahak in free sparring. Mu Young realized Seok was trapped in a no-win situation. Nang Ho Sang urged him to fight and show his unyielding firmness. His opponent simply told him to accept and end things quickly. Seo calmly looked at the offer, considering his options. Despite the pressure, Seo Kyun firmly refused. The opponent sighed, clearly disappointed by his decision. Instantly, Seok was struck directly in the face. While recovering, the third opponent closed in on him. Seok quickly raised his guard, bracing for the attack. He then went on the offensive against the third opponent, but his opponent countered, landing a direct hit. Watching this, Mu Young and the others grew worried. The third opponent relentlessly followed up with another powerful kick. In a swift move, Seok grabbed the attacker's leg. The opponent was caught completely by surprise. He desperately tried to make Seok release his leg, but Seok held firm, lifting the opponent's leg high. He violently rotated the leg, throwing his opponent off balance. Nang Ho Sung yelled for Seok to grab him now. Before Seok could finish, the opponent grabbed his hair. Seok immediately shoved the opponent's hand away from him. He followed up instantly with a powerful punch. The third opponent didn't even flinch at the incoming blow. Seok's fist flew closer and closer to his face, but he stopped his fist just millimeters from impact. Seok remained completely silent, holding his threatening position. In response, the third opponent simply smirked at him. He grabbed Seok's hand, pulling him into a leg lock. The opponent then landed a vicious kick to Seok's face. Nang Ho Sang and Mu Young watched in complete shock. Before Seok could recover, the opponent stood over him. He then delivered another brutal kick to Seok's face. Blood erupted from Seok's mouth from the powerful impact. As Seok fell, the opponent unleashed a barrage of attacks. His merciless assault on the injured Seok continued relentlessly. Everyone watching was completely terrified by the brutal sight. The relentless attacks just kept on coming without pause. Nang Ho Sung screamed out for his martial uncle in desperation. Furious, he condemned the attackers as insolent brats. Nang Ho Sung then grabbed the attacker by the neck. He then tossed the third opponent backward with force. The elders were completely surprised by his sudden interference. The crowd demanded his removal for disgracing the duel. Nang Ho Sung had brought the fight to a complete stop. Meanwhile, the third opponent watched, looking very annoyed. Mu Young helped Seo Kyun up as Nang Ho Sung asked if he was alright. Seo Kyun weakly assured his friend that he was fine. The elders angrily demanded to know the meaning of his actions. He introduced himself and formally objected to the duel's fairness. He argued that Seo Kyun's opponent had retaliated with dishonorable cruelty. The elders listened to his impassioned argument in total silence. He questioned if attacking someone showing courtesy was the current martial law. The elders exchanged silent, uncertain glances with one another. An elder explained that the alliance now pursues practical duels. The duel only ends when someone gives up or is knocked out. He continued that Seo Kyun's choice to show mercy was his own. Therefore, Seo Kyun alone had to bear the consequences of his choice. Nang Ho Sang argued this was too far and tried to appeal to custom. The elder coldly questioned his reliance on old customs. Nang Ho Sang was visibly surprised by the elder's outburst. The elder shouted that weak customs had ruined old martial arts. Nang Ho Sang listened silently, unable to respond to the accusation. He insisted true old customs meant a death duel without honor. The crowd began to shout, demanding he step down. They yelled a pity victory would only humiliate Jong Seo Kyun. Mu Young watched the hostile crowd with a stoic expression. Suddenly, Seo Kyun's voice cut through the noise, admitting defeat. He thanked Mu Young, assuring him that everything was all right now. He admitted his arrogance made him overlook the duel's reality. He bowed his head, showing his sincere remorse for his actions. He then told Nang Ho Sung he would take over again. With renewed resolve, Seo Kyun prepared to continue the fight. The elder announced the fourth duel, clearing the stage for combat, and so, the next brutal duel officially began. Seo Kyun was immediately overwhelmed and brutally beaten. His blood quickly began to cover the entire stage. Mu Young could barely stand to watch the brutal display. The crowd mocked him, saying he should have yielded earlier. They decided old martial arts were no match for Shinmuhak. Seok was being beaten mercilessly, spewing blood with every vicious hit. A powerful attack from the fourth opponent finally sent him to the ground. Even on the floor, Seo Kyun's body trembled, refusing to give up. The entire arena watched, wondering if this was finally the end for him. His opponent coldly asked if he intended to continue this hopeless fight. With great effort, Seo Kyun struggled and managed to stand up again. He defiantly entered his fighting stance, ready for whatever came next. His resolve was immediately met with another brutal and overwhelming assault. The relentless barrage of attacks continued, giving him no room to breathe. The crowd, however, cheered for the merciless and one-sided slaughter. Watching from the side, Mu Young simply couldn't bear to see any more. Nang Ho Sang felt it was impossible to change perceptions of old martial arts. He knew their arts didn't have to be mainstream, that was acceptable, but he couldn't accept the oppression of those who held different values. He wondered why they were ridiculed for simply preserving their own ideals. Shinmuhok's growth didn't give them the right to oppress everyone else. On the stage, Seok took another heavy blow, his wounds bleeding freely. A spray of his blood splattered across the floor from the impact. As Seok lay broken, Nang Ho-sung pondered the right way to treat minorities. Later that day, Nang Ho-sung called out to his brother Jung. He pleaded with the bloodied, unconscious Seok-hyun to open his eyes. As Seok-hyun regained his senses, Nang Ho-sung checked if he was conscious. He kept calling out, asking if Seok-hyun could hear him. The bloodied Seok-hyun confirmed that he could hear just fine. Nang Ho-sung said he would set the broken nose, asking for a stick. Chung Yob then handed a brush to a confused Mu-young. Mu-young stared at the object, completely bewildered. Confused, he gave the brush to Nang Ho-sung, wondering why he had it. Nang Ho-sung warned Seok to brace himself for the incoming pain. He then proceeded to treat Seok-hyun's severe injury. The immense pain caused Seok-hyun to spit out blood. Seeing this, Nang Ho-sung immediately stopped the treatment. Nang Ho-sung then turned his attention towards Mu-yob. An elder appeared, asking someone to assess Seok-hyun's condition. Upon hearing the elder's voice, Seok-hyun looked up. The elder grimly stated that Seok-hyun would become a corpse. Seok-hyun insisted he was fine, but the elder declared the duel was over. He then signaled to the other elders, confirming the end of the match. An announcer declared Seok-hyun was unable to continue, so the duel was stopped. This was explained as a safety measure to prevent any fatal accidents. However, traditional rules would apply since a combatant was too injured to continue. A disciple or another sect member could now fight as a substitute. The announcer then called for anyone willing to step forward immediately. The arena fell silent as no one from the Wudong agency moved. The other escorts were shocked and too scared to volunteer after that. Seok-hyun struggled against Nang Ho-sung, insisting he could still fight. The crowd mocked the agency for their cowardice, calling them a spineless rabble. Listening intently, Chung Yob heard the crowd declare that the Wudong sect was finished. Chung Yob stood silently, absorbing their harsh and dismissive words. With no substitute stepping up, the announcer prepared to end the event. Just then, Jum Mu-young declared that he would go up and fight. He approached the elder, stating he would take Seok-hyun's place in the duel. The elder, surprised by this development, admitted the rules didn't forbid it. Suddenly, someone from behind struck Mu-young's pressure point, neutralizing him. She collapsed, revealing a mysterious figure in tattered clothes standing over her. The elder was completely shocked by the mysterious figure's appearance. Nang Ho-sang and Seok-hyun were just as stunned by what they saw. The man was none other than Chung Yob, standing right before Mu-young. He gazed down at the unconscious Mu-young. Seok-hyun stammered Chung Yob's name in utter disbelief. Chung Yob, however, remained completely silent. Sometime later, Mu-young finally regained consciousness. She found herself in a cart. She sat up in a hurry, completely disoriented. She called for her companions, and Nang Ho-sung confirmed she was awake. Jumping down, she urgently asked about the duel's outcome. In response, everyone silently turned their gaze toward the stage. On the stage, Chung Yob stood, the center of everyone's attention. He remained silent, his expression completely lifeless and unreadable. Jum Mu-young was surprised, quietly recognizing her senior brother on stage. The crowd murmured, wondering if the beggar-like man was truly from Wudong. They grew restless, questioning why the fifth opponent had yet to appear. Even the elders were confused, unsure about the opponent's strange absence. Chung Yob simply stood there, completely silent and still. As the crowd demanded a fight, his attention shifted to a ladybug. The tiny insect gently landed on his shoulder. He calmly offered his finger for it to crawl onto. Gazing at the bug, he noted the score was tied at 2 wins. He mused that with no opponent, it should be a default win. Hearing this, the elders grew visibly worried by his declaration. Unfazed, Chung Yob continued to silently watch the small ladybug. After a moment, the ladybug took flight, soaring high into the air. He watched it disappear, his gaze following its path. Then he turned, declaring the opening ceremony was now officially concluded. His sudden announcement left everyone completely and utterly surprised. He simply asked for their continued support of the Wudong agency. The crowd could only stare, completely stunned by this unexpected turn. The crowd's shock turned to fury, pelting him with objects and angry words. Chung Yob sarcastically called this the most elegant celebration he'd ever received. Bowing, he hoped they'd show their ancestors the same disrespectful respect. Enraged, the crowd accused him of mocking them with his words. Undeterred by their fury, Chung Yob simply continued to bow before them. An elder yelled at the opponents, asking why they were just watching. A second opponent stepped forward, eager to be his next challenger. Chung Yob feigned concern for his stamina, but the opponent was confident. Chung Yob just stood there, completely silent for a moment. He then cheekily asked if they could just let him win by default. He argued it wouldn't cost them anything and would save their reputation. The opponent lost his patience, unable to stand Chung Yob's attitude any longer. He yelled, questioning his honor and demanding he leave the stage immediately. But then, without warning, the second opponent suddenly collapsed to his knees. The entire crowd was shocked into absolute silence by this turn of events. An eerie silence fell over the entire arena. Chung Yob simply grabbed his second opponent's hand. Without warning, the man collapsed to the ground. Chung Yob stepped back, telling him not to startle him like that. An elder, seeing the commotion, rushed onto the stage. He quickly checked on the fallen opponent's condition. He demanded to know what trick Chung Yob used. Chung Yob just looked confused by the question. He then casually stretched his back, seemingly unconcerned. He even froze mid-stretch, holding the odd pose. The elder frantically called out for immediate help. Medics immediately rushed in to tend to the fighter. Meanwhile, Chung Yob casually picked his nose, completely unfazed. The third opponent cautiously asked what he had done. Ignoring him, Chung Yob sat down on the ground. He took off his shoes, wondering if he won by default. The elder was furious, convinced he had pulled some kind of trick. He accused him of using a hidden weapon and ordered his capture. The surrounding opponents suddenly grew worried and cautious. Their expressions hardened as they focused intently on him, but their focused expressions quickly turned to confusion. They closed in, forming a tight circle around Chung Yob. One of the opponents impatiently told him to get up. Chung Yob calmly looked up at the man who spoke. Instead of getting up, he slowly raised one arm. Then, to their disbelief, he nonchalantly picked his nose. The opponent stared, completely bewildered by his action. A voice broke the silence, ordering him to get up, but he remained perfectly still, ignoring the command. The opponent's frustration began to mount. His patience was clearly wearing thin. Enraged, he demanded if he'd been heard, repeating the order. Chung Yob just continued, completely unfazed. He then moved the dirty hand, making the opponent recoil in disgust. The man stared, utterly repulsed by this bizarre tactic. Then, Chung Yob casually wiped his finger on the ground. The third opponent grew visibly annoyed by Chung Yob's disrespectful action. Calling him a disgusting bastard, the enraged opponent lunged forward with a kick. Suddenly, a voice apologized for being late, freezing the attacker in his tracks. Everyone's attention immediately shifted towards the source of the unexpected voice. A figure could be seen ascending the stairs into the arena. All the opponents stared, their expressions showing surprise and apprehension. The mysterious person finally stepped onto the stage, revealing themselves. The opponents recognized Master Baekgyeol, who questioned the chaotic scene. Baekgyeol greeted familiar faces, while others whispered in surprise. Noticing their hushed tones, he asked what they were whispering about. An opponent nervously greeted him, but Baekgyeol remembered their last meeting. An elder stepped forward, greeting the man as Master Yuck. The elder suggested they handle business first, and Master Yuck agreed. Onlookers identified him as the brawler Yuck Wee from the Black faction. His nickname came from countless wounds stitched up after fights. He mused that the Murim alliance must be desperate. Baekgyeol approached, asking why Chung Yob wasn't getting ready to fight. He then taunted him, questioning if he even knew how to fight. Chung Yob calmly replied that it all depended on the opponent. He clarified that he couldn't fight anyone who was stronger than him. But against a weaker opponent, he knew exactly how to fight. Amused, Baekgyeol asked if he was actually going to fight. Chung Yob wondered if there was any real need for them to fight. Baekgyeol confessed and urged to punch him, citing bad memories with Wudong. He then offered Chung Yob a chance to forfeit without a fight. Baekgyeol counted to 3, but Chung Yob countered by counting to 5. Chung Yob calmly began his own count, starting with 1. He repeated the number, seemingly unbothered by his opponent's impatience. As Baekgyeol's frustration grew, Chung Yob slowly counted to 2. He reached 3, then pretended to lose count, further annoying his opponent. Suddenly, an enraged Baekgyeol kicked Chung Yob straight in the face. The force of the kick was absolutely devastating. Chung Yob was thrown back, collapsing to the ground. But Baekgyeol didn't stop, continuing his relentless assault. He followed up with another vicious kick to Chung Yob. The onlookers watched in shock, growing increasingly worried. Baekgyeol continued his savage assault with a barrage of kicks. One after another, he violently kicked the fallen Chung Yob. The crowd debated if this was fair, but the duel's rules were absolute. Changing tactics, Baekgyeol grabbed Chung Yob by the neck. He then unleashed a furious volley of punches. Chung Yob was being beaten to a pulp, unable to defend himself. Showing absolutely no mercy, Baekgyeol continued his barrage of attacks. Another brutal punch landed with crushing force. Chung Yob took the full force of the blow. Jiu Mu Young urged them to stop the match, fearing for his life. Seok just watched as the fight continued. The powerful blow sent Chung Yob crashing to the ground. But Chung Yob was already trying to recover. Baekgyeol saw his chance and leaped forward. He dashed in, delivering a kick to Chung Yob's face. Baekgyeid showed absolutely no mercy in his assault. Chung Yob could only endure the relentless beating. Baekgyeid then violently tossed him to the ground. The crowd erupted in cheers at the display. The elders watched, declaring the fight was over. Chung Yob lay motionless on the ground, defeated. Baekgyeid stood silently over his fallen opponent. He turned to look at the cheering crowd. The elders began to stand, believing the match was already over. The crowd lamented Wudong's fall, thinking a second-ranked disciple never had a chance. The defeated one's escorts worried about their jobs and what to say back home. As Baekgyeid watched the crowd, Chung Yob was quietly counting down from 5. Baekgyeid soaked in the glory of his apparent victory. But suddenly, the elders stared ahead in visible shock. Sensing the change in atmosphere, Baekgyeid looked back. To everyone's disbelief, Chung Yob was getting to his feet. Baekgyeid's eyes widened in utter surprise at the impossible sight. Chung Yob didn't just stand, he looked completely unharmed. He calmly dusted off his clothes as if nothing happened. Then, he casually began to stretch his arm. After warming up, he settled back into his fighting stance. He then began to approach the stunned Baekgyeid. Everyone in the crowd was completely stunned by this unexpected development. Chung Yob just stood there calmly, a picture of confidence. He positioned himself directly in front of the bewildered Baekgyeid. Entering a stance, he asked if Baekgyeid wanted to lose by default. Chung Yob stood tall, ready for whatever came next. Baekgyeid was suspicious, wondering what kind of trick this was. Chung Yob called it flowing water defense, saying Baekgyeid could back out. Annoyed, Baekgyeid spat and prepared himself for battle. In a flash, Baekgyeid dashed forward, throwing a powerful punch. The punch flew straight towards Chung Yob with incredible speed. It looked like the fist was just about to connect. The blow closed in, aimed right for Chung Yob's face. But with expert grace, Chung Yob easily deflected the punch. He countered with just a light tap to Baekgyeid's head. Baekgyeid was left completely confused by the move. Chung Yob then simply pushed the baffled Baekgyeid away. Baekgyeid thought his opponent was just trying to provoke him. But then, Baekgyeid suddenly felt something unexpected. Chung Yob had landed a solid punch right in his stomach. The blow sent immense agony coursing through Baekgyeid. Meanwhile, Chung Yob remained perfectly calm and composed. The elders watching from the side were completely shocked. Mu Young, Seok Hyun, and Nang Ho Sung were equally stunned. Nang Ho Sung recognized it as a classic trick to cause carelessness. The force of the blow brought Baekgyeid down to his knees. Chung Yob lightly tapped his back as Baekgyeid spat on the ground. A shocked gasp escaped Baekgyeid's lips. He suddenly began to throw up violently. The watching crowd reacted with disgust. To everyone's horror, he then started vomiting blood. Everyone was completely stunned by this development. Once the terrible ordeal was finally over, Baekgyeid turned to Chung Yob, his face filled with pure rage. He then launched a furious attack against him. Chung Yob smartly blocked Baekgyeid's fist with his own skull. The impact sent a sharp jolt of pain through Baekgyeid's hand. Baekgyeid couldn't help but cry out from the intense pain. Chung Yob taunted him, pointing to the exact spot to hit. As Baekgyeid attacked, Chung Yob launched a powerful counterfist. The force of the blow sent Baekgyeid's blood across the stage. Without pausing, Chung Yob stepped closer to deliver another technique. He slammed a brutal elbow directly into Baekgyeid's chin. He continued the assault with a hard headbutt to the face. Chung Yob then quickly seized control by grabbing Baekgyeid's hand. He used the opening to land a heavy palm strike. More of Baekgyeid's blood began to splatter onto the stage floor. But Chung Yob showed no mercy, continuing his relentless attacks. The vicious barrage of strikes was painting the stage red. He then landed another devastating attack with his backhand. The endless barrage of powerful blows just kept on coming. Baekgyeid was being pummeled mercilessly in front of the entire crowd. Every single person in the audience was completely shocked. The crowd could only stare on, totally in awe of him. Suddenly, Baekgyeid called for the fight to stop. As requested, Chung Yob immediately halted his advance. Baekgyeid insisted they couldn't continue like this. Admitting his defeat, Baekgyeid suddenly revealed a hidden weapon. The weapon was now clearly visible in his hand. From the sidelines, Mu Young watched in shock, recognizing the object. With weapon in hand, Baekgyeid rushed towards Chung Yob. He launched a desperate surprise attack on his opponent. However, Chung Yob remained completely calm and unfazed by the assault. Without warning, Chung Yob raised his hand. He then brought it down, striking a shocked Baekgyeid. Baekgyeid was slammed violently into the ground. The force sent his hidden blade flying from his hand. It clattered to the ground right in front of him. A cold sweat broke out on Baekgyeid's brow. He was utterly confused by what had just happened. Chung Yob simply looked down at him. Baekgyeid was sweating under the intense pressure. Chung Yob asked if he was trying to say something. With great difficulty, Baekgyeid finally conceded the match. Accepting the surrender, Chung Yob turned away. His victory secured, Chung Yob left the stage. Baekgyeid was left completely distraught by his defeat. The elders watched the stunning outcome in awe. A silent amazement fell over the entire crowd. Even the escorts were incredibly surprised by the result. Chung Yob then stood before the Council of Elders. The elders exchanged looks, confused by this development. The leading elder took a moment to think. Having made his decision, he gave a signal. An announcer declared the official founding of the agency. In response, the entire crowd erupted in cheers. Everyone, especially Jiam Mu Young, was overjoyed. The escorts celebrated their hard-won victory loudly. The agency could now operate with official backing. A celebration feast was announced for that evening. The crowd celebrated Chung Yob's victory with thunderous cheers. The older generation was especially ecstatic, their joy evident. Nang Ho-sung congratulated Seo-kyun, who gratefully accepted the praise. However, the younger crowd left angrily, calling the duel a scam. They dismissed it as a staged duel, not true skill. Nang Ho-sung conceded that their accusations weren't entirely wrong. He explained duels were customs meant to avoid bloodshed. But now, the new martial arts were aggressively taking over. Suddenly, an escort pushed through the crowd holding an item. The escort made his way directly onto the stage. He presented the mysterious item to a confused Chung Yob. The escort smiled brightly, his purpose still unclear. Chung Yob remained utterly baffled by the unexpected gesture. He turned, looking back towards the crowd for an explanation. Mu Young eagerly pulled Seo-kyun from the crowd onto the stage. As they both stepped onto the stage, the escort watched. The mysterious item was then passed over to Seo-kyun. Seo-kyun took the object, his expression unreadable. He then pulled back the cloth, preparing for a reveal. He revealed the Wodong Sect flag, a symbol of overcoming strength with stillness. Seok proudly raised the sect's flag for all to see. The crowd looked on, content with the outcome of the challenge. However, Chung Yob remained completely expressionless, showing no emotion. Defeated, he quietly sat down and started putting on his shoes. A little while later, things had settled down at the branch. The escorts carefully adjusted the new sign, trying to get it perfectly straight. They successfully hung the official sign for the Wodang Sect branch. Nang Ho-sang felt relieved and asked where Brother Zheng had gone. Jia Mu-young explained he was talking with the branch leader inside. Inside, the important conversation was just beginning. The elder congratulated him, admitting the victory was truly unexpected. He praised the young man's skill, asking if he was a Wudong disciple. The elder found it strange that such a skilled fighter was unknown until now. He wondered how Wudong could have fallen with such a talent present. The elder apologized for his slip of the tongue, but Seo-kyun dismissed it. He then revealed they never intended to approve their opening in the first place. The elder clarified that he held no personal grudge against him. The orders from above prohibited approving any group not converted to Shinmahawk. When questioned, the elder confirmed above meant the martial alliance. He explained that without converting, they couldn't act freely. His own group would face some backlash, but Seok-hyun shouldn't worry. He lamented that Shinmahawk was now unavoidable, found in every village and bookstore. He questioned the logic, since even fools could now learn martial arts. The alliance's unchecked growth mostly attracted marketplace ruffians, not serious practitioners. He worried about how lightly such easily learned techniques would be used. Catching himself, he apologized and dismissed his words as idle talk. He admitted that even though his own group converted, it wasn't by choice. Abandoning the martial arts he'd trained his whole life for was incredibly difficult. Seok-hun acknowledged his words, promising to keep them in mind. The elder invited him to dinner, and Seok-hyun agreed to see him then. Just as they were parting, the elder had one last thing to add. He advised Seok-hyun to visit a nearby Shinmahawk hall when he had time. The elder urged him to learn their methods, reminding him of his recent experience. After a thoughtful pause, Seok-hyun quietly agreed that it was indeed true. Later, the group gathered just outside the estate, ready to depart. Jiam Mu-young approached, addressing Seok-hyun as her martial uncle. Nang Ho-sung asked about the meeting. Seok-hyun said the leader offered kind words. Nang Ho-sung scoffed, cynically comparing the leader's actions to offering a cure after disease. As they departed, the group looked back at the estate one last time. They arrived back at the familiar sign of the Wudong escort agency. Seok-hyun admitted his embarrassment but thanked them for the positive outcome. He told Mu-young he was happily surprised she represented Wudong on stage. He gently called her actions reckless, but she was just glad he intervened. Meanwhile, her other senior brother, Im Chung-yob, remained completely silent. The sudden shift in atmosphere left Seok-hyun looking on in confusion. Im Chung-yob yelped in pain. Mu-young had pinched him as payback. At her prompting, the two senior brothers simply exchanged a knowing look. Seok-hyun then sincerely thanked Chung-yob, admitting the entire agency was in his debt. Seok-hyun asked if the duel meant Chung-yob would finally join them. Chung-yob simply remained silent, offering no answer. Instead, he said it was time to head home since the ceremony was over. Seok-hyun wished Chung-yob would consider this place his home too. Seok-hyun pressed, asking for the reason he decided to enter the duel. Chung Yob paused for a moment before finally speaking. He explained that he just felt the other men were being rather rude. He thought they should have a better perception, even if times have changed. Besides, he wondered who would pull the cart if Mu Young had gotten hurt. He also didn't want Seo Kyun's hard work to collapse because of an injury. Becoming flustered, Chung Yob dismissed it and told Mu Young it was time to go. Mu Young protested, wanting to speak with his martial uncle as well. A short while later, the group began to depart. Chung Yob, Mu Young, and Nang Ho-sung prepared to leave. Seo Kyun watched them go, bidding them a quiet farewell. Once they had finally left, he stood alone. A chilling doubt washed over him. He couldn't have done this by himself. Meanwhile, Nang Ho-sung told Chung Yob he really should have joined them. Ho-sung noted that talented people without focus often fall into lethargy. After a moment of silence, Chung Yob quietly questioned if he thought so. Ho-sung mused that everyone faces problems and goes through especially hard times. He concluded, however, that what Chung Yob does next is up to him, but unbeknownst to them, their opponents from the duel were lying in wait. One opponent swore he would crush the man who dared to humiliate him. Nang Ho-sang explained that at their core lies pride, valuing an enemy's acknowledgement. The loser protects their honor with death, while the victor shows basic courtesy. He mused that modern times have forgotten this fundamental principle. Mu Young agreed. Mu Young found the perspective unique, though he couldn't fully sympathize. He agreed emotions rule them, but lamented being judged only by prejudice. Nang Ho-sung listened thoughtfully to his point of view. He then turned, asking another person for their opinion on the matter. The man hesitated, but Nang Ho-sung encouraged him to speak freely. Suddenly, however, Nang Ho-sung decided it was time to end their conversation. A tense silence fell between them as the discussion abruptly halted. He explained regretfully that he had other guests to attend to now. Mu Young grew suspicious, questioning who these supposed guests were. Nang Ho-sang hinted it was just leftover bitterness from the earlier duel. He then bid Mu Young farewell, having enjoyed their rare, open conversation. As he turned to leave, Mu Young called out his name. Nang Ho-sung wished Chung Yob a speedy recovery, having high expectations for him. Chung Yob then told Mu Young that it was time for them to leave. With their goodbyes said, the two groups went their separate ways. Nang Ho-sung watched them go, bidding them a silent farewell. Mu Young and his companion finally departed from the area. Nang Ho-sung's gaze followed them until they were completely out of sight. Once they were gone, he turned his attention to the shadows. He called out, suggesting it was time for others to finally emerge. From the shadows near a wall, several figures began to appear. A group of men stepped out into the open, revealing themselves. It was a large group, far more than just a few thugs. The intimidating group of thugs slowly approached Nang Ho-sang. They questioned his decision to let the Wudong disciples leave so easily. One admitted they wanted revenge on them too for Teacher Yuk. Nang Ho-sung questioned the need to drag others into personal matters. He picked up a bamboo stick, musing that things could have been different. He told them bringing so many men would make it hard to save face. His opponent was visibly confused by this strange declaration. In an instant, he hurled the bamboo stick directly at his confused opponent. The force of the impact sent the man flying far away. Seeing this display of power, the other thugs grew wary. Without pausing, he grabbed another stick and charged at the remaining thugs. He moved with incredible speed, delivering a series of devastating attacks. One after another, the thugs fell to the ground, completely overwhelmed. He then sarcastically thanked them for bringing so many men along. The defeated thugs could only groan in pain on the ground. Their leader screamed at the remaining men, urging them to attack. Following their leader's command, all the thugs charged in at once. But Nang Ho-sung stood his ground, completely prepared for their assault. A short while later, while pulling the cart, Mu Young's mind was on the previous battle. He realized the guest must be the one who fought senior brother Jung. Finding the man despicable, he grew worried for senior Nang. Chung Yob, however, calmly assured him that everything would be fine. Mu Young hoped senior Nyang would beat the detestable man to a pulp. But Chung Yob grimly considered that the man might actually die today. Mu Young was taken aback by his friend's serious tone. Meanwhile, back at the fight, the thugs were being completely overwhelmed. They were being systematically beaten down one after the other. Nang Ho-sang was single-handedly destroying the entire group of thugs. The remaining thugs could only watch on in fear. Soon, Nang Ho-sang stood tall before his defeated opponents. Their leader sneered, claiming he only meant to rough them up a bit. Unsheathing his sword, he acknowledged Shaolin's strength must have a source. One of his men nervously reminded him that blades were forbidden here. Embarrassed and enraged, the leader violently struck his own subordinate. He then turned his menacing gaze back towards Nang Ho-sung. Both fighters prepared, sizing each other up for the coming battle. A confident smile spread across Nang Ho-sung's face. He snapped his staff's tip, making it a sharp weapon. Both warriors settled into their combat stances, ready to strike. His opponent began circling him slowly, looking for an opening. The warriors faced each other, tension filling the air. Suddenly, his opponent charged forward with his sword. Meanwhile, Mu Young asked how Chung Yob knew Nang Hosung. Chung Yob fell silent, lost in a memory. He remembered meeting him on a rainy night in the past. Nang Hosung had introduced himself as a Shaolin disciple. Chung Yob accepted his offered handshake. He introduced himself as a disciple of Wudong. Chung Yob explained they traveled together after a youth gathering. Mu Young wondered if those gatherings were just drunken parties. In the past, Nyang Hosung found the place foul, needing a drink to sleep. Nang admitted this was unplanned, but Im Chung Yob accepted the new reality. Spotting a ridge, they planned to drag their target out when he appeared. Back in the present, Im Chung Yob realized the story held considerable truth. The scene shifts back to Nang Hosung dominating the thugs in combat. His third opponent dropped his sword, his hand completely shattered from the blow. But Nang Hosung showed no mercy, relentlessly continuing his brutal assault. After a flurry of vicious strikes, Nang Hosung finally lowered his staff. The third opponent was left broken and severely injured on the cold ground. Nang Hosung coldly asked the downed man if he was feeling the chill. Despite his injuries, the man slowly reached for his fallen blade. As soon as he grasped the hilt, he desperately lunged for an attack. But Nang Hosung instantly struck his hand, disarming him once again. He then swept the man's legs with his staff, sending him to the ground. Nang Hosung pointed the staff threateningly at the fallen opponent's neck. Without hesitation, he continued to viciously strike the man's face. Blood began to pour from the opponent's face. Nearby, Nang Hosung casually spun his staff, completely unfazed. He told the man to pick up his weapon before sunset. The beaten opponent looked up, completely bewildered. Confused, he reached down and picked up his blade. Later that evening, the scene shifted. Mu Young tells his senior brother that they have finally arrived. He says he's sleeping early, telling Chung Yob to go upstairs alone. But he stops his senior brother, having more on his mind. He reflects on how much the world has changed while they were indifferent. He feels Seo-kyun's burden is too heavy, and they should lend their strength. Mu Young plans to quit the inn and join the Wudong escort agency. He hopes his senior brother will also have made a firm decision by then. His senior brother silently considers his words and agrees. Later that night, the story shifts to another scene. We return to Nang Hosung and the thugs from earlier. The thugs are now covered in injuries, clearly having been beaten. An injured thug kneels, begging forgiveness for not recognizing his elder. Nang Hosung chuckles, finding himself at a loss for words. The thug pleads to be left alone, saying they are all pitiable.